We are here at the Design Summit as part of the New York Design Awards, and I'm truly thrilled to meet you, Dan Formosa. Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Before we begin, because I know we're going to talk about design studios, design practices, and the studio of the future, I suppose, what is it that you do? Give me a background.
Well, I'll tell you, my background is in product design, industrial design. I also have a master's and a PhD in ergonomics and biomechanics. Now, that means that is basically the engineering of the human body. So I understand how the body works. Getting into that, I realized that you can't understand physical aspects of the body without also understanding the brain, how people think. So I come at it from a human-centered point of view. So
from a human-centered point of view, and you travel the world speaking about various topics, including the design studios and design practices of the future. So what is it that you do as you travel the universe?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Companies all want to innovate. Suddenly there's an innovation bug. The I word is everywhere. And it's not just companies, of course. It's organizations, it's startups, and lately it's countries. Countries, in order to be globally competitive, they realize they need to innovate. They need brands. They need something that's sustainable. So it's been a pretty interesting, especially the last couple of years. It's been pretty interesting.
To try and go into these places, whether it's a country or a studio, to help them innovate. They need help. They need some assistance in this.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants to be different, right? Everyone wants to be meaningful. And in many cases, it's not a design problem, it's a cultural problem. You know, whether it's a country or whether it's a company. You almost have to go in and think a whole lot beyond the design to the source of inspiration and what are the motivators for design, but more especially what are the things, what are the blockades?
Yeah. And what are they actually asking for in the first place? So how do you do that? How do you enter into that environment when there is a requirement for cultural change in order to have design outcomes?
Well, you know, the advice is easy, really. It's to understand and see the problems. That's relatively simple. To make that change is a long-term effort, right? To change that culture, boy, it's tough. That part of it is a challenge, which of course is why it's a challenge to innovate.
So when we're talking about what a design studio of the future looks like, can we talk about what it looks like today? What is it that we are currently experiencing in terms of practices before we start talking about what it might look like later down the track?
Well, I'll give you history from my point of view, which may date me because, you know, coming out of design school in the late 70s and you know, working with companies in the early 80s, it was a revelation to companies to say we want to do our own design research. And when I say it was a revelation, it was like, you know, bumping heads. But throughout the 80s, that changed. And one of the things that the design field was based on was understanding a process of how to design something. Now that was the 80s, early to mid 80s. So most design firms and the way we design things now is very much based on that 1980s model of let's start with research and let's do iterations, let's simulate, etc. Which is great. That whole process is really important, but there's also a huge opportunity now to come at design from a knowledge perspective. Like, how does design affect behavior? How do we understand perceptions? How do we understand gender differences? So there's a whole world of topics how do we measure design? How do we add metrics to design? You know, designers avoid metrics like the plague. You know, there's no way to measure my design. But of course, imagine if we can measure design. Imagine if instead of thinking of design as design is working in a studio, think of design as working. Yeah, think of design as working in a lab, and that would be so powerful. You know, the ability to say this is why this typeface works. And this is how much it's working. Or this is how much this medical device is working. This is how much this design. This is how much usability is bringing to the party, right? If that could be measured, we'd all be doing pretty well as designers.
But is it not being measured in some aspects, like some elements of design, some product design actually does enable you to do that, whether it's a wearable piece of technology or something else? You can get some of those metrics already, but you're talking about in other areas as well.
Yeah, I'm talking about metrics from a bigger perspective in the field of design. Like, how can we measure how design affects behavior? What's very interesting, though, is that a lot of designers totally embrace the idea of quantifying yourself. So there are bracelets, or my shoes are talking to my phone, or we're sending information to the cloud. So that part of quantification is well embraced in the world of design. But to quantify the design itself is what I would call opportunity. Let's try doing that. Because if we do that, we may actually learn more about design and get better and better and better at it.
And where is that happening already? Where are you already seeing these types of changes, people who are able to embrace that opportunity that we're talking about?
Well, I think there are inklings of that change happening. A lot of people are talking about opportunities in understanding gender, for instance, right? And not just corporations, but just globally, right? Males and females are different species. But females are huge. Understanding females are a huge opportunity. And when you look at fields like automobile design, where females buy more cars, but it's a very male-dominated field, you know, internally. Sports equipment. You know, lots of sports equipment are designed for males and shrunken for females, but females are quite different. Medical equipment, and what I mean by that is surgical equipment, etc. There are so many females coming into the medical field, but there are so many devices that they have to use that were designed for male bodies, you know, male hands, etc. So the opportunities are huge. One of the things to look at if you're going to soul search is that if you look at the field of design or the field of engineering, and if you go back even just as far as the 1930s, you'll realize that those fields were developed by males. So the way we design and engineer things now is the way males would design and engineer things. Not that females would have a totally radically different point of view, but they may have enough difference so that they are more comfortable and maybe even more effective within those environments. And I think that's the sort of thing that's inevitable. That will be happening.
Okay. So, but I mean, I imagine this is already happening in many design firms that are female led already. So this, I imagine, exists particularly here in New York, or not. I don't know.
I think it's emerging.
Right. Okay. So if it has to be more than just gender balance, though, surely, the things that you're talking about, the great opportunities. So what are some of the other things that you're seeing that will happen more and more in the future?
Well, I believe we're going to take, while the process, like I said, is important, right? The process can help. Remember that process was mainly developed for incremental changes. When you want to innovate, that process isn't a great fit. So what we want to do is bring more knowledge to design. We want to know things about design. And that means we want to know more about psychology. We want to know more about things like behavior, or just physically how the body works. I often go to schools and I talk about basic biomechanics. How does your hand work? And I would tell you that most design schools do not tell their designers throughout their 4 years of undergraduate school how your hand works. The focus is on the thing, and I say, if you're going to design a product, you need to design it at least up to here. You need to understand that whole system. But I'm pretty sure in many cases, my 1 hour talk at that school, maybe it's 90 minutes, is the only exposure they may have to that topic.
Yeah, right, to human-centered design. So is the answer education? Was that too simple?
Well, I think the answer is education in the sense of setting a mindset. That it's not about the process. I got a phone call a while ago from a student in California, and she said, "I want to learn about your process." And I went on a 45-minute rant. I'm sure she failed her project, but I went on a long rant on how it's not about the process. The process, again, it's important, but it's a commodity. I do a lot of work in Asia. Spent a lot of time last year in the Philippines, and I can go as far as the Philippines, and the designers there know that process. So in the 1980s, where that was unique, we were bringing something, as consultants, we were bringing something new to companies. Now everyone knows that. Companies are embracing design. They're pulling it in-house. They know how to do that stuff, right? So the question is now, as consultants, what's next? What are we going to do next? And that's what we're exploring.
Okay. So what are you going to do next? What are you exploring?
bringing measurements to design in time for the designers to react, and convincing them also it's part of the creative process. The more patterns they see in human behavior, or the more patterns they see in human physical ability, the better off their designs are going to be. And it really, once designers start embracing that, it's actually a lot more fun. Also bringing a sense of personalization to design. Instead of saying, let's design for 10,000 people, which is the way most companies think, let's design for a couple of people first. And let's see if it works for those people, because those people are part of your customer base.
And the only reason that you can do that now is because technology has taken us to that point where you can personalise, and it can be done more, well, inexpensively, I suppose. It used to be mass manufacture. Now it can be much simpler, I suppose, and personalisation is possible.
Yeah, and a lot of times it is based on electronics. You know, like your phone and my phone may be the same phone, but I have no clue how to use your phone.
Try it?
Right? I wouldn't know. Well, first of all, I can call your friends, right? But still, I'd be a little stymied trying to figure out your apps and your phone. But physically, the phone's the same, right? Now, so the question is now the phone itself is not nearly as important as the interface, right? As the operating system. So what happens now when that's applied to things like cars? Will my next vehicle be based not on the physical car, because basically they're all alike, right? Physically they're all alike. Will my next car purchase be based on the operating system? Because I want to bring my stuff from my old car to my new car, or to my shared car, or to my zip car, or to my rented car. So very interesting parallels you can make between what has been happening over the last couple of years, or even a decade or so, to how that's going to transcend more and more into our lives.
I want this car. This is what I want. I want to drag all my applications into my own vehicle. It sounds
really,
good.
Isn't it great when your car knows you? I have the greatest conversations with my navigation lady.
How is Siri? Is she nice to you?
She's great.
Where does she take you?
I got a Amazon Echo. Yeah. And I signed up early, months ahead of time, when it was half price. If you want to experiment, right? I am so used to talking to Alexa, who is this voice in my kitchen.
She sounds lovely.
That in my mind, she's great. But boy, I'm scaring myself. I'm not that far away, but I don't think I'm alone, right? It's amazing how effortlessly I walk into my kitchen and I say to no one, Alexa, what's the weather? And a voice tells me the weather, and I am almost at a point where I think that's normal. So when you have technology that helps, I think it gets adopted at the speed of light. Yeah. I think self-driving cars, for instance, are going to take place faster than we think. A lot of technology we struggle with, and we sort of put by the wayside. But when it helps us, when it truly helps us, when it really resonates with us, or it's meaningful, I think that adoption rate happens overnight. At
the moment, all of these ideas are fantastic, but people who owns the data, you can privatize it, of course, and a lot of the time it will belong to the company that is collecting the information as you're driving your self-driving car. But if you're talking about personalization, how do you get to own that data so it's just yours and just yours alone?
Let's talk about data in terms of healthcare, because that's really interesting, and that's where a lot of people are on guard, right? But imagine healthcare research in the future. So now my shoes have been talking to my phone for years now. People know where I'm walking, people know where I live, the weather, etc., right? And they know that for maybe, several 100 million people around the world. Where will our next round of medical research come from? Because imagine now that we have all this information going to the clouds. Every startup in Brooklyn is making a wearable device that's going to send information to the cloud. What to do with that, they're not too sure, as far as I can tell. But what happens now when all that information is in the cloud and we can now relate one thing to another? Imagine the medical research teams not needing to touch a person, but figuring out how to connect those databases. If someone's doing this and they're living in this environment and they're eating this and they weigh this, what does that mean for our health? So it would be amazing ways to do medical research. In a way, I think that, typically Western medicine is based on understanding body parts. right? So my sense is that all this technology and all this data that's coming to the cloud is going to bring us to a different form of Eastern medicine. We're going to understand a much bigger system. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. There is quite a bit of work by the World Health Organization understanding things like traditional medicine because it works. And there are several billion people in the world who rely on traditional medicine. So huge, interesting topic. When it comes now to data security, health data security, that's tricky because you kind of want to contribute, right? Yeah, I want to help the world, right, with my cough or whatever allergy I have, right?
But I don't want you to turn off my pacemaker. For
exactly.
Example,
we don't want anyone
tap.
We don't want people tapping in.
That's right.
Yeah. So tough question.
It is a tough question, but it's one that is ongoing. We've been talking about things such as pacemakers or medical technology. What if we flip that around to psychological health or mental health? What kind of projects are there that illustrate this point?
One of the things that I've noticed is that when designers tend to address health problems, the answer tends to be an app or a website. And I'm not sure the app or the website is really the key to solving some problems. However, it is a source of information. And one of the things to realize is that you've got not only a patient in some cases, but you've got that patient's very close-in network, personal network. And very often it's that close-in personal network who needs the information, or the patient would benefit if everyone understands. So, for instance, migraine headaches. No one understands migraine headaches. Take an aspirin, right? Except the person who has the migraine headache. And they'll tell you an aspirin doesn't solve migraine problems. So, I don't want to say enlighten, educating people, I guess, informing people is probably informing that personal network makes sense, right? So now the question is, how deep do you go with personal information to release that even to your immediate network? And then it becomes family, but then it becomes family and friends. Then it becomes maybe an even bigger circle of people. Again, it can be very beneficial to the patient, but there is a kind of a contradiction there that we don't want that information released necessarily. So tough question. It can be solved on an individual basis, but that may not be effective.
Yeah, we still haven't quite worked it out, have we? How do we deliver services that reflect the technology that we have today and the data that will be collected from it, but that is also secure, that is safe? So we're still sort of nutting that one out, aren't we?
Yeah, my sense is that there are a lot more people interested in my American Express card number than my mental health issues.
What is that American Express card number?
Oh, well, I'll tell you.
And the signature and the expiry date.
And the numbers on the back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, those little numbers that won't get scanned. Yeah.
Great, thank you. No, you're right. We're much more focused on the financial rather than the mental, I suppose. Dan Formosa, it's been fantastic to meet you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.